The speaking world. The recitations of the ocean's breaking waves. The hymns rising from the green hearts of forests. The narrations of rivers, rhapsodies of valleys, prairies. The whispers passing between clouds and mountain tops. The soliloquies of the deserts, colloquies of blooming gardens. The paeans chorusing through the canopies of rampant jungles. The shared poetries of the moon, stars, and midnight wind. All the sensuously shaped and deeply throated voices of the speaking world that sing through the air, that seek out listening ears. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in, for listening in to show 118 in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live from the sounding and resounding coast of Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. In broadcast 117, we started with dessert, focused on starting with the rich and ripe fruits of life, self, love, the living world, waiting to be tasted, savored, appreciated, the sweetness, the joy, the bliss, putting it first and seeing how it greatly and beautifully flavors all the rest. This week the world is calling you and us from many directions, in many ways. Voices solo and chorused, wanting to be heard, felt, understood, and answered. Answered meaningfully, essentially. Maybe in ways we might be new or unused to, yet able to. Moved to if we're deeply listening, deeply caring about that calling. So let's lend our ears into this multitude, this magnitude of callings together through the gathered cultural commentary, poetry, inquiry, and, I hope, as with all these broadcasts, shared discovery. Let's start with this poem. Adventurer. Your day beckons, calls like the sea calls to the mariner to set sail, to enter deeper waters, calls to you, adventurer, to set a course for the next horizons of self, of life, for great expanses awaiting your voyaging, for the wild uncharted territory inviting your exploring. For in some way, shape, or form, we are all fellow adventurers on one interesting voyage of life or another, aren't we? We're also earth beings, and this is a poem called Earth Man, a poem for we earthbound starward beings. And what to me we may ultimately be about. Earthman, Earthwoman, planetarian, worldling, human kindler, Homeric sapien, you, we, solar beings, each seeking, drinking, reflecting light. Well, the world calls to me, maybe you too, daily, sometimes hourly, the world of nature especially. One day, one March day, it spoke to me in these words. Before you ask. Words from the earth. Before you ask. Land dwellers, sea rovers, tillers, spelunkers. before you ask the questions many ask, have asked since man first appeared here, or may in time dawn in your mind, or form on the lips of your fellow creatures, about me. Look from heart and root across this place, at this oasis, into this whole intelligence I offer you freely, share with you generously. And you might then sense the answers, might well see, feel, and receive your answers before you ask. From Orion magazine, by Diane Ackerman, World at Dawn, The Pleasure of Life Rekindled. At dawn, the world rises out of darkness, slowly, sense grain by grain, as if from sleep. Life becomes visible once again. When it is dark, it seems to me as if I were dying and I can't think anymore, Claude Monet once lamented. More light, Goethe begged from his deathbed. Dawn is the wellspring of more light, the origin of our first to last days as we roll in space, over 7 billion of us in one global petri dish, shot through with sunlight in our cells, in our minds, in our myriad metaphors of rebirth, and all the extensions to our senses that we create to enlighten our days and navigate our nights. Whatever else it is, dawn is always a rebirth, a fresh start, even if familiar routines and worries charge in, clamoring for attention. While waking, we veer between dreamy and lucid. Crossing that threshold each morning, we step across worlds, half a mind turned inward, the other half growing aware. We may use all our other senses in the dark, but to see, we need the sun spilling over the horizon, highlighting everything and pouring a thick yellow vitamin into our eyes. We're usually too hurried to savor the elemental in our lives, the reeling sun, moon, and stars, prophecy of clouds, ruckus of birdsong, moss brightly blooming, moon shadows and dew, omens of autumn and late summer, fizzy air before a storm, wind chime of leaves, fellowship of dawn and dusk. Yet we abide by forces so old we've lost the taste of their spell. It's as survivors that we greet each day. Part of the great parentheses of our lives, dawn summons us to a world alive and death-defying when the deepest arcades of life and matter beckon. Then, as if a lamp were switched on in a dark room, nature grows crisply visible, including our own nature, ghostly hands, and fine sediment of days. Thank you, Diane Ackerman. If you don't know about her, she's written some wonderful, wonderful books and other things. She's a poet, essayist, naturalist, and she has, I think, 24 nonfiction books out, including A Natural History of the Senses, which is how I first discovered her decades ago. Thank you, Diane Ackerman. Here's a poem from Central Park West, New York City. Listening to the sunrise. The morning sun must be rising. Under the covers, eyes closed, I listen to the long and short-toned sounds of birds chiming like bedside clocks, rousing the world from its dreams. Listening to the sunrise, because I think our ears have eyes, and our eyes have ears. W.S. Graham wrote this next piece. Listen, put on mourning. Listen, put on mourning, waken into falling light. A man's imagining suddenly may inherit the hand-clapping centuries of his 1 minute on earth, and hear the virgin juries talk with his own breath to the corner boys of his street, and hear the Black Maria searching the town at night, and hear the play ropes caw the Sister Marianne, and hear Willie and Davy among bracken of Narnain sing in the mist heavy with myrtle and listeners, and hear the higher town weep a petition of fears at the poorhouse close upon the public heartbeat, and hear the children tig and run with my own feet into the netting drag of a suiciding principal. Listen, put on light break, waken into miracle. The audience lies awake under the tenements, under the sugar docks, under the printed moments. The centuries turn their locks and open under the hill their inherited books and doors, all gathered to distill like happy berry pickers one voice to talk to us. Yes, listen. It carries away the second and the years till the heart's in a jacket of snow and the head's in a helmet white, and the song sleeps to be wakened by the morning ear bright. Listen, put on mourning, waken into falling light. Thank you, W.S. Graham. Joy Harjo's poem, Once the World Was Perfect. Once the world was perfect and we were happy in that world. Then we took it for granted. Discontent began a small rumble in the earthly mind. Then doubt pushed through with its spiked head. And once doubt ruptured the web, all manner of demon thoughts jumped through. We destroyed the world we had been given for inspiration, for life. Each stone of jealousy, each stone of fear, greed, envy, and hatred put out that light. No one was without a stone in his or her hand. There we were, right back where we had started. We were bumping into each other in the dark. And now we had no place to live, since we didn't know how to live with each other. Then one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket. A spark of kindness made a light. The light made an opening in the darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder. A Wind Clan person climbed out first into the next world, and then the other clans, the children of those clans, their children, and their children, all the way through time, to now, into this morning light, to you. Thank you, Joy Harjo, Native American poet. It's from her collection, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings. Here's one by Mary Austin, A Caller of Buffalo. Whenever the summer singed plains past my car window, heave and fall like the flanks of trail-weary cattle, when the round-backed hills go shouldering down to drink of the western rivers, and dust like ceremonial smoke goes up from the long-dried wallows, then I remember the caller of buffalo. Then I think I see him, head feathers slant in the wind, shaking his medicine robe from the buttes of Republican River at Pawnee Bluffs, offering sacred smoke to the great white buffalo. Then at dawn, between jiggling curtains, I wake to the star-keen note of his deer-shin whistle. O caller of buffalo, hunt no more on the ancient traces, pale and emptied of going as a cast snakeskin. Come into my mind and hunt the herding thoughts, the white buffalo of the much-desired places. Come with your medicine-making, O caller of buffalo. Thank you, Mary Austin. Here's a poem that refers to a ritual performed in India by Rajasthani hill tribes to ensure rain and a good harvest. It's called Tiger Mask Ritual by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. When you put on the mask, the thunder starts. Through the nostrils orange you can smell the far hope of rain. Up in the Nilgiris, glisten of eucalyptus, drip of pine, spiders tumbling from their silver webs. The mask is raw and red as bark against your face bones. You finger the stripes ridged like wheels out of your childhood. A wind is rising in the north, a scarlet light like a fire in the sky. When you look through the eye holes, it is like falling. Night gauzes you in black. You are blind, as in the beginning of the world. Sniff. Seek the moon. After a while, you will know that creased, musky smell is rising from your skin. Once you locate the ears, the drums begin. Your fur stiffens. A roar from the distant left, like monsoon water. You swivel your sightless head. Under your sheathed paw, the ground shifts wet. What is that small wild sound sheltering in your skull against the circle that always closes in just before dawn? Thank you, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. That's from her collection, Leaving Yuba City. Well, from the Marginalian, and I know this book, and I wanted just to see what they had to say about it versus going back through it again at the moment, was ecologist and philosopher David Abram on the language of nature and the secret wisdom of the more than human world. We are human only in contact, he said, in conviviality with what is not human. Well, the book is absolutely superb. I've read it a few times. The Spell of the Sensuous, Perception and Language in a More Than Human World. I'll just give you a small slice or two. On the natural world, he said, to shut ourselves off from these other voices, to continue by our lifestyles, to condemn these other sensibilities to the oblivion of extinction, is to rob our own senses of their integrity and to rob our minds of their coherence. We are human only in contact and conviviality with what is not human. We may acknowledge intellectually our body's reliance upon those plants and animals that we consume as nourishment. Yet the civilized mind still feels itself somehow separate, autonomous, independent of the body and of bodily nature in general. Only as we begin to notice and to experience, once again, our immersion in the invisible air do we start to recall what it is to be fully a part of this world. This breathing landscape is no longer just a passive backdrop against which human history unfolds, but a potentized field of intelligence in which our actions participate. Thank you, David Abrams. I encourage you to read that book or any of it. And do you notice and or experience or feel such a part, dear listeners, of the living landscape, the living world? I'm curious. Well, that piece of Abrams recalled a poem I composed about the body of the earth and its precious fluids, precious earthly fluids, as precious as the ones residing inside your body, that you may exchange with another, that flow too through the body, the living, loving body of the earth. One's here to share with you essence to essence, but only with awareness of, great reverence for, their equal seminal preciousness. So each joining and exchanging you make with her that she makes with you, and these nectars, these rare earth elixirs, becomes an act of intimacy, an act of union, an act of beauty. From Soulcraft Musings, which is animus.org, Bill Plotkin, he says, he talks about eco-awakening. Precisely this early adolescent shift from egocentrism to ecocentrism. This major life passage occurs when a post-pubescent person raised in an egocentric cultural environment has their first conscious and embodied experience of their innate membership in the earth community and recognizes this membership as their primary place of belonging in the world. A 50-year-old Presbyterian pastor describes his eco-awakening experience during a multi-day group retreat in the summer high-altitude Rocky Mountain forest. Here's the pastor's words. I was sitting by a small stream on a starry, moonlit night. I felt a strong, sentinel-like presence from a stand of large pine trees above the stream. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a tourist in nature. The forest was alive, and I was in communion with her. When I heard the trees clearly say with one voice, quote, "Now you belong to us," I was shaken. At that moment, a tectonic shift took place within me. I felt a sense of belonging to the whole cosmos, not just a church or denomination. I looked up in the sky full of stars and began to weep, overwhelmed by joy, in the admission that I no longer felt the need to save the world. I just wanted to belong more fully to it. Beautiful. Well, another part, I felt being in touch with our native selves, our animal selves, our visceralness, our viscerality, allows us to feel and navigate territory more carefully, more sentiently. What a great ability in these times that we could call on, and I think we ought to call on, This is called sensing. And here it is. I'm thinking this first day of a new year, after an earth-shaking last of animals in the wild, how they sense danger especially, and so keenly, so instinctively, have a whole awareness, always, of the visible and invisible. One their survival and survival of their young hinges on. And if we, animals too, if we have lost or disconnected our early warning radar, that sixth sense our early ancestors and, quote, primitive tribal people in the bush, jungle, forest, kush also had, and honed, depended on, attuned as they were to all the life or death sensations, signals, and vibrations of their environment. I'm picturing the deer in the winter woods whose large ears prick up, cup, and pivot to listen and assess the existence or imminence of a threat. The careful bird that takes knowing flight. Or those fellow creatures feeling far into the ground, using the sensors in their skin, their Pacinian corpuscles, from elephants in their feet to bobcats in their guts, enabling them to feel earthquakes, tsunamis, eruptions, long before they arrive, and move to safety. Sensors we possess, but now rarely practice using. Out of touch as many, far too many are, with nature, outer and their inner. But all this dormant circuitry, maybe today more than ever, no, definitely today, we men, women, humans would do well to awaken, activate, to feel, hear, taste, smell, if, how, or where we're at peril, amongst predators. Keep us out of a or any great unseen jeopardy while there's chance. Now I'm no longer thinking, only cocking my ears, sharpening my sight, sniffing the surrounding air, feeling what's telling in my gut and subtly telegraphing below my open soles, sensing like an earthwise animal. It was written New Year's Day 2021, so after the great upheavals of 2020 that came into me. Well, questions about the world calling to you, dear listeners. Questions. What calls have you been hearing lately? How and where do they enter into you? When was the first time you heard a clear call from the world, in any form, from nature, to culture, your deeper self? How keenly are you listening these days? Or could you listen, if more so? Were there times you heard but decided not to heed calls from the outer world? Maybe later understood what they were about and why they were happening, arising. How does the world around you need you in new or different ways? Especially in these strange and anxious times many are moving through, wondering about, greatly challenged by. And will you rise to the occasion in some called for way? Maybe, as I said at the very beginning, a way you're unused to, but able to respond to. What else do you feel the world is trying to say to itself, or the earth is trying to communicate to us? That's vital we take in. Is there anything you'd like to greatly call the world to? If you could, speak to the whole world right now. Howard Thurman said, in the stillness of the quiet, if we listen, we can hear the whisper of the heart giving strength to weakness, courage to fear, hope to despair. I came across this, but I can't find or recall the author. There's no reference to them. But I wanted to share it with you because I feel it relates to what we're talking about, and may it resonate with you. Maybe it will. About how you may want to live. So this person said, I want to live simply. I want to sit by the window when it rains and read books I'll never be tested on. I want to paint because I want to, not because I've got something to prove. I want to listen to my body, fall asleep when the moon is high, and wake up slowly with no place to rush off to. I want not to be governed by money or clocks or any of the artificial restraints that humanity imposes on itself. I just want to be boundless and infinite. Hear, hear. If you know who said that, let me know. The poet and farmer, Wendell Berry, on the ennobling effects of solitude, the kind he gained by surrendering to nature's gentle gifts for quieting the mind. He said, we enter solitude in which we also lose loneliness. True solitude is found in the wild places where one is without human obligation. One's inner voices become audible. One feels the attraction of one's most intimate sources. In consequence, one responds more clearly to other lives. The more coherent one becomes within oneself as a creature, the more fully one enters into the communion of all creatures. The return from that kind of solitude, he cautions, can be disorienting. From the order of nature, we return to the order and the disorder of humanity. From the larger circle, we must go back to the smaller within the larger and dependent on it. One enters the larger circle by willingness to be a creature, the smaller by choosing to be a human. And having returned from the woods, we remember with regret its restfulness, for all creatures there are in places hence at rest. In their most strenuous striving, sleeping and waking, dead and living, they are at rest. In the circle of the human, we are weary with striving and are without rest. All the more reason to seek that rest, that deeper rest. Do Berry's words speak to you? I'd like to know. They definitely speak to me. Often daily, I would also encourage you to stop and step into the ease and awareness that pausing brings. Maybe we'll do that right now around this. Pause. Breathe. Behold where you are. Wherever you are. See all the life flowing around you. Feel all the life flowing inside you. Breathe. Pause. To just be with yourself. Be at ease with yourself. Be held simply by your body. Gently by your heart. Freely by the light and the air and the pure ground of the earth. Breathe here for a while with everything. Poem of mine, a wondering, and a piece I return to and use to check in through from time to time. What shapes you as you live your life, year by year, season by season, day by star-born night? Forms and fashions, sculpts and stipples you. There's the nature of the landscapes and cultures you move and deep breathe through. The weather of elements, relationships, calms and storms of the heart you're exposed to. The workings and playings of your mind, your dreams. The transits of the planets, the music of the natural world, all shaping and reshaping you slightly to finely, gently to greatly, as you live and love through every part of your beautifully pliant life. Sojourns in the Parallel World by Denise Levertov. We live our lives of human passions, cruelties, dreams, concepts, crimes, and the exercise of virtue in and beside a world devoid of our preoccupations, free from apprehension, though affected, certainly, by our actions. A world parallel to our own, though, overlapping. We call it nature, only reluctantly admitting ourselves to be, quote, nature too. Whenever we lose track of our own obsessions, our self-concerns, because we drift for a minute, an hour even, of pure, almost pure response to that insouciant life, cloud, bird, fox, the flow of light, the dancing pilgrimage of water, vast stillness of spellbound ephemera on a lit window pane, animal voices, mineral hum, wind conversing with rain, ocean with rock, stuttering of fire to coal. Then something tethered in us, hobbled like a donkey on its patch of gnawed grass and thistles, breaks free. No one discovers just where we've been when we're caught up again into our own sphere, where we must return indeed to evolve our destinies. But we have changed a little. Thank you, Denise Levertov. I've shared things by Henry Beston before, and from his 1928 classic, The Outermost House, A Year of Life on the Great Beach of Cape Cod. Marvelous book, absolutely. Worthwhile if this speaks to you or has already spoken to you before and you know the book. In his 8th chapter, Night on the Great Beach, he writes this: "Our fantastic civilization has fallen out of touch with many aspects of nature, and with none more completely than night. Primitive folk, gathered at a cave mouth round a fire, do not fear night. They fear rather the energies and creatures to whom night gives power. We of the age of the machines, having delivered ourselves of nocturnal enemies, now have a dislike of night itself. With lights and ever more lights, we drive the holiness and beauty of night back to the forest and the sea. The little villages, the crossroads even, will have none of it. Are modern folks perhaps afraid of the night? Do they fear that vast serenity, the mystery of infinite space, the austerity of the stars? Having made themselves at home in a civilization obsessed with power, which explains its whole world in terms of energy, do they fear at night for their dull acquiescence and the pattern of their beliefs? Be the answer what it will, today's civilization is full of people who have not the slightest notion of the character or the poetry of night, who have never even seen night. Yet to live thus, to know only artificial night, is as absurd and evil as to know only artificial day." Thank you, Henry Beston, and may we regain that being in touch with nature, the poetry of night, reveling in it. Let's go there. Next chance you have. And in the deep of night, like tonight here, after I finish talking with all of you out there in the world, I will go out and glean into the sky and the stars. It's a poem called Speaks the Star. Through time, space, histories, simply giving itself, sharing its light, its distant yet deeply present peace, quiet through each night, asking nothing in return, getting everything in a return of simple, eternal wonder. So yes, there can be calls even in silence. Well, what are we waiting for, more largely, especially when so much around us has its arms wide open? The world is ready. In case you missed the news, not in any headlines, but all the heartlines, the world is ready to be loved today. The whole world, from the birds and the clouds, the cities and their spires, to the tides and the downpours, the countrysides and their colors, everything and everyone you're sharing this whole world, whole earth with. Wake, breathe, dream your whole life with. Here, the heart, light, music, spirit of it, all ready and waiting for your loving. There's a book called Wild Ones by Jon Mooallem. He said in that book, maybe you have to believe in the value of everything to believe in the value of anything. The book, Wild Ones, a sometimes dismaying, weirdly reassuring story about looking at people, looking at animals in America. So in here, I'll give you a note or two from in here. Our world is different, zoologically speaking, less straightforward and more grisly We're living in the eye of a great storm of extinction on a planet hemorrhaging living things so fast that half of its 9 million species could be gone by the end of the century. At my place, the teddy bears and giggling penguins kept coming, but I didn't realize the lengths to which humankind now has to go to keep some semblance of actual wildlife in the world. As our own species has taken over, we've tried to retain space for at least some of the others being pushed aside, shoring up their chances of survival. But the threats against them keep multiplying and escalating. Gradually, America's management of its wild animals has evolved, or maybe devolved, into a surreal kind of performance art. Just as we're now causing the vast majority of extinctions, the vast majority of endangered species will only survive if we keep actively rigging the world around them in their favor. We are gardening the wilderness. The line between conservation and domestication has blurred. Maybe we never outgrow the imaginary animal kingdom of childhood. Maybe it's the one we're trying to save. In part, I'm part of a generation that seems especially resigned to watching things we encountered in childhood disappear. Landline telephones, newspapers, fossil fuels, but leaving your kids a world without wild animals feels like a special tragedy, even if it's hard to rationalize why it should. The truth is that most of us will never experience the Earth's endangered animals as anything more than beautiful ideas. They are figments of our shared imagination, recognizable from TV, but stalking places out there to which we have no intention of going. For me, wildlife has always been a reminder of all the mystery that exists outside my own experience. It's the perspective that William Temple Hornaday feared American kids would lose if they only stared into microscopes instead of strolling through the woods with a field notebook. Thank you for that. Jan Moal Alam. We have so many wonderful things to share, but I'm going to need to edit a little bit as we go. Enough by David White. Enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here. This opening to the life we have refused again and again until now. Until now. Rebecca Solnit from Hope in the Dark. The grounds for hope are in the shadows, in the people who are inventing the world while no one looks, who themselves don't know yet whether they will have any effect, in the people who have not yet heard of who will be the next Cesar Chavez, the next Noam Chomsky, the next Cindy Sheehan, or become something you cannot yet imagine. In this epic struggle between light and dark, it's the dark side, that of the anonymous, the unseen, the officially powerless, the visionaries and subversives in the shadows, that we must hope for. For those on stage, we can just hope the curtain comes down soon and the next act is better, that it comes more directly from the populous shadows. Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca Solnit. It's a very meaningful book, Hope in the Dark. Very helpful for these times, I would say. Written before them, but helpful for them. Rachel Carson, you would remember her as the great marine biologist and author who catalyzed the modern environmental movement with her book Silent Spring. Mankind is challenged as it has never been challenged before to prove its maturity and its mastery, not of nature, but of itself. The stream of time moves forward and mankind moves with it. Your generation must come to terms with the environment, face realities instead of taking refuge in ignorance and evasion of truth. Yours is a grave and sobering responsibility, but also a shining opportunity. You go out into a world where mankind is challenged, as it has never been, to prove its maturity and its mastery, not in nature but of itself, and therein lies our hope and our destiny. Rob Bresney says, how might you strive to adore every creature, plant, and rock in the world with the same excitement that you bestow upon the lover who excites you most? What prayers will you unleash at the height of your orgasmic fervor to promote the healing and success of people in need? The poet Rumi, the ancient poet, be empty of worrying. Think of who created thought. Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? Move outside the tangle of fear, thinking. Live in silence. Flow down and down into always widening rings of being. How wide open for our being and becoming. How wide open is the window of your awareness, is the path to yourself, is the door to your body, to your heart, to your soul. Are you to believing you can have any kind of life, many kinds of lives, to realizing every waking day, every dreaming night, you're swimming in a wide open sea of possibilities. William Stafford's poem, Silver Star. To be a mountain, you have to climb alone and accept all that rain and snow. You have to look far away when evening comes. If a forest grows, you care. You stand there leaning against the wind, waiting for someone with faith enough to ask you to move. Great stones will tumble against each other and gouge your sides. A storm will live somewhere in your canyons, hoarding its lightning. If you are lucky, people will give you a dignified name and bring crowds to admire how sturdy you are, how long you can hold still for the camera. And sometime, they say, if you last long enough, you will hear God. A voice will roll down from the sky and all your patience will be rewarded. The whole world will hear it. Well done. David White, once again, The Bell and the Blackbird, from his latest collection. The sound of a bell still reverberating, or a blackbird calling from a corner of the field, asking you to wake into this life, or inviting you deeper into the one that waits. Either way takes courage. Either way wants you to be nothing but that self that is no self at all, wants you to walk to the place where you find you already know how to give every last thing away. The approach that is also the meeting itself, without any meeting at all. That radiance you have always carried with you as you walk both alone and completely accompanied in friendship by every corner of the world crying, Alleluia. Thank you, David White. The French writer André Gide, everything that needs to be said has already been said, but since no one was listening, everything must be said again. What Do We Know by Mary Oliver. The sky cleared. I was standing under a tree, and there were stars in the sky that were also themselves at which moment my right hand was holding my left hand, which was holding the tree, which was filled with stars and the soft rain. Imagine the long and wondrous journeys still to be ours. Diane Ackerman. We are listening. As our metal eyes wake to absolute night, where whispers fly from the beginning of time, we cup our ears to the heavens. We are listening on the volcanic lips of Flagstaff and in the fields beyond Boston, in a great array that blooms like coral from the desert floor, on high-wire webs patrolled by computer spiders in Puerto Rico. We are listening for a sound beyond us, beyond sound, searching for a lighthouse in the breakwaters of our uncertainty, an electronic murmur, a bright, fragile I am. Small as tree frogs staking out one end of an endless swamp, we are listening through the longest night we imagine, which dawns between the life and times of stars. Thank you, Diane Ackerman. What was Walt Whitman's advice on living a vibrant and rewarding life? Love the earth and sun and the animals. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss whatever insults your own soul. Walt Whitman from Leaves of Grass. All right, we're coming into the last stretch of things for our program. World is Calling show. Robinson Jeffers. There are the only hours that are not wasted, these hours that absorb the soul and fill it with beauty. This is real life, and all else is illusion or mere endurance. Does this reverie of flowers and waterfall and song form an ideal, a human ideal, in the mind? It does. much the same ideal that Phidias sculptured of man and woman, filled with a godlike sense of the violet fields of Greece, beautiful beyond thought, calm as my turtle dove before the lurid lightning of the unknown. To be beautiful and to be calm without mental fear is the ideal of nature. Thank you, Robinson Jeffords, from Life of the Fields. The Life of the Fields. The World as It is Carolyn Miller's piece. The other callings from other corners of the universe, from our world, from our lives. The world as it is. No ladders, no descending angels, no voice out of the whirlwind, no rending of the veil or chariot in the sky, only water rising and falling and breathing springs and seeping up through limestone aquifers, filling and flowing over russet stands of prairie grass and dark pupils of black-eyed Susans. Only the fixed and wandering stars, Orion rising sideways, Jupiter traversing the southwest like a great firefly, Venus trembling and faceted in the west, and the moon appearing suddenly over your shoulder, brimming and ovoid, ripe with light, lifting slowly, deliberately, wobbling slightly, while far below the faithful sea rises up and follows. Thank you, Carolyn Miller. Working Together, one more by David White. We shape ourselves to fit this world, and by the world are shaped again. The visible and the invisible working together in common cause to produce the miraculous. I am thinking of the way the intangible air passed at speed round a shaped wing easily holds our weight. So may we, in this life, trust to those elements we have yet to see or imagine, and look for the true shape of our own self by forming it well to the great intangibles about us. Thank you, David White. Thich Nhat Hanh. Fear keeps us focused on the past or worried about the future. If we can acknowledge our fear, we can realize that right now we are okay. Right now, today, we are still alive, and our bodies are working marvelously. Our eyes can still see the beautiful sky. Our ears can still hear the voices of our loved ones. On the verge. Maybe you're there. On a shore. On a threshold. On a frontier. Of something new. Of possible leavings, steppings, crossings you greatly want or greatly need to make. To places of larger being that are calling. That your inner or outer world is calling you to. May have long been calling. Cannot go unheeded any longer. Places of wider opening, vital opening that are waiting, places you and your knowing soul belong. Next to last, the future begins. The moment you awaken, open your all-seeing eyes. The moment you listen to the callings of your all-knowing heart. The moment you christen and set sail in the vessel of your whole-souled self. And, my friends, I expect you're ready for this. Before I end, here are your wings. To fly with, no need to wait for any other sign from heaven or earth. Just open to the change, to the favoring winds of possibility. Off you go. Thank you again for leaning in, for listening and feeling in, and for sharing these broadcasts with others and sending in comments and contributions. If you'd like to offer a thought, compliment, or question, send a note. My email is colin@thepoetorialist.com. To give thanks with a donation, I thank you for that if you do. You can contribute by Venmo to fivefold, FIVEFOLD, at pipeline.com, or by PayPal, or directly through my site, thepoetorialist.com, in the Donate tab, or by mail to me at P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. At times, patrons can also host me as a working poet in residence on a given property for a given time in a given season, including this autumn or winter. to create a new flight of poetic art and dedicate it to them, email me to discuss the possibilities. I can also serve as a virtual poet in residence for an online community. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist, and subscribe if you like there to stay notified of next shows. I hope you'll lean in soon again. Until then, my friends, open your inner ears greatly and finely in this time of vital listening to the world and what it's saying, what it's calling you to, calling forth in you, and open your whole self, whole spirit in responding, in rising to answer. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.